Hey everyone, hope you're well. Just wanted to record a little quick video just showing some of the work I've been doing recently. If you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen I've been tweeting a lot about a CSS grid-based Gutenberg theme that I'm trying to build. I'm kind of trying to get a starter theme together that we can use on a lot of our projects. I wanted to try to use CSS Grid with it. It's proved to be quite tricky, but actually quite useful. I've already used it on a project of ours, but what I wanted to do is actually set it up in a way where it's really super easy to customize going forward. So I can take grid framework variables and just plug them in, and my grid is built for me, and it just kind of works out of the box. And also the thing I've been working a lot on is spacing between blocks, and trying to get that so that every project going forward, I just know that like the defaults are just good and they just work, and whatever you throw at the theme, things kind of sit in the right position. So that's what I've been up to. It's been tricky. It's been labor of love for the last little while, but it's going all right. So just wanted to show you it really. So you can see, hopefully you can see on my screen here. I have added a whole bunch of different blocks and groups and alignments and background colors to a page, and I've just been trying to like test them all out to see if everything works. The first thing I'd say is that I don't know if WordPress has, it probably does, an opinion, or if other people have an opinion on what nested blocks should do. So if I have a wide block within a default width block, for example, what should that look like? If I have a full width block within a wide block, what should that look like? So I've had to kind of make some of that up as I've gone along, and you can see here I've made some decisions. So in a default group, if I add another default block, it sits inside. The wide block also sits inside, and the full block actually pulls kind of full bleed to the edge of that. That's one of the decisions I made. I've done something very similar down here for blocks nested within wide blocks. So the default ones kind of sit now within the kind of narrower column. The wide ones stretch the full width. Because of the background colors, I've left a bit of margin. But the full blocks kind of pull themselves outside of those margins, full bleed again. So it's lots of little decisions like that needed to be made, and there's a lot of CSS going on to make this happen. I'm sure there's combinations that I haven't got right yet. I found one earlier that was just like a default block within a wide block wasn't aligned properly. So I'm going to catch more and more of these. But this is how I've kind of set it up. I've made some of those decisions, and it seems to be working pretty well. As you can see, as you scroll down that page there, things line up nicely in some manner to that grid. That's the Firefox inspector that you can see those lines. So it's going well. So I wanted to use grid because it gives me a little bit more control over the page rather than just using max widths and margin autos, which is I think is what Gutenberg kind of does out of the box. Using grid means we can create more interesting layouts and more interesting grids, more interesting structures. But it also has its drawbacks. For example, I can't get image alignment working or any kind of block alignment where a paragraph text would float around the image, for example. So I can't get that working currently. I think that just might be impossible, but we'll see. Okay, so I've kind of given a bit of an introduction, but what I kind of really wanted to show you today was how I've used CSS variables, custom properties, I should call them, so that this whole grid structure is customizable. So I've got a layout.scss file here, and I've basically set up a whole bunch. I should probably rename this because this is, I'll grid. Some of it's global spacing. It is spacing, and then it gets into the grid stuff below. I'll probably restructure this a little bit. So at the top, I've set a global spacing unit. This is used all through the site. A lot of these custom variables are actually taken from the 2021 theme, which is actually what I kind of started with ages ago, and I've kind of ripped it all apart and put it all back together. And I think this is going to be useful going forward with some of the global styles that WordPress is bringing in with 5.8. So I'm keeping to that same those naming conventions. I think is gonna help. So I've got this global spacing unit, which you can see is used in a lot of these other custom properties. Global spacing measure, just to say basically I don't want text to go wider than 60 characters. I think that's used on paragraphs and maybe other places. Then I've got two main spacing variables here, horizontal and vertical. They're actually, that's not right, so that is, I think that's currently 40 as well. Oh, sorry, I think those are both, I could be wrong. I think those are both 40 at the minute because the baseline unit is 20. Yeah, I think 20, global spacing unit. The baseline unit is 10, the global spacing unit is 20, and then the horizontal and vertical default spacing is 40 pixels, that's right. So then this, I think, was not 80. I'm going to have to check all this. I just didn't update all these comments. And the micro, I think, is right at 20. Okay. So that's all the spacing. Sorry, I did name these properly. So at the top here, I just wasn't at the top of the file. We've got our baseline unit up there. This is actually flexible. I'll cover this in a different video probably, but assume that this may as well just say 10 pixels in this particular case. Okay, so here's my grid settings. So my first setting is the full max width. So I can actually set, at the minute, no matter how big the viewport is, full width groups will stretch right to the edge of the screen. Worked on a project recently where they didn't want that. They wanted that to like max out at like 2000 pixels or something like that. So you could drop in like 2000 pixels here and that will max it out at that size. Now we also want to be able to max out the kind of wide width. In this case, you can see, if I pull this out, yeah. So it's just this like this green rectangle is our wide width. So if I set a block to align wide, that's what we want it to be. And I want to set a max width for that. Again, I don't want that to just keep growing and growing and growing. So that will grow up to a point. That point is 940 pixels. And then we get into the grid structure a bit here. So the default columns, so that's the narrow blocks, or the blocks that aren't given custom alignment. So if you just add a heading block or a paragraph block on the page, it'll be a default block, and that's going to span 4 columns. And the wide block here is going to span, in this case, 6 columns of our grid. And now what I can do is I can offset these. So I'm saying that I want the default column to be offset by 2. So it's like 1 box here, 2 columns here, and then it starts. And I want the wide to be offset by 1. So there's 1 here, and then the wide column starts. And then at the bottom here, the global grid full width columns, I'm basically saying I want it to be the same as the wide width columns, plus 2. And that's going to give us our 2 kind of gutters on either side of the wide width. Okay, so that works really well. Then I've got some grid calculations down here. They're kind of a little bit complicated, but that's just saying like the max column width. So I use those further on, but that's not so important for this particular demo. But what I do want to show you now is that I can start setting up different grid structures. So at the minute I've got a 6 column grid here, you could call it, plus the kind of gutters to make it wide. So it's actually 8 columns, but we'll call it a 6 column grid. If I wanted to make that kind of more standard 12 column grid, I could do that. So I could type 12 in here, and you'll see that this wide group now has 12 columns inside it. But you can see that everything else has gone a little bit strange. So the default width here is still our original 4 columns, and it's still only offset by 2. So in this case, in a very typical scenario like a bootstrap world, you might want to set that to 8. And you can see that that now spans 8 columns, and the offset's not quite right, so we probably want an offset of 3. And there we go. And now if I scroll up and down the page, you can see that everything is lining up, hopefully, nicely with our new grid structure. Now, one of the things I love about this approach that the kind of max width and margin auto approach doesn't give you in the same way is that if I might not actually want this center aligned layout. This is it's kind of the norm these days to kind of have this center alignment. But on a recent build, actually, I wanted to buck that trend, and I wanted to do like a left aligned grid. So if I just change the default column offset to 1, now I've got a left aligned kind of grid. So my default blocks will always line up with this left hand side, and all the blocks will actually, all the way down. So and you can just play with that. I mean, we can add any kind of we can add any numbers in here, and it should just kind of work. We can make this, 5 columns to be half the size of the wide ones. Anything you want, and all the gutters kind of stay in place where they should be. Obviously, you can't divide 10 by 3. That's why these aren't lining up properly. These images are pulled out deliberately just to give a bit of variation. You can see there. But yeah, so you can see that it's all kind of working quite nicely. There are some gotchas. The editor is tricky. I'd actually love to see what this looks like in the editor now if I refresh that. I haven't actually tried it in the editor with a kind of strange alignment. Let's see what that looks like. This is going to be super slow because I'm screen recording. It's going to take forever. Yeah, it actually works. The title isn't aligned, but that's not actually output on the page anyway. So I scroll down here. Yeah, there's some things that are a bit broken. I'm not at all surprised. It could be a screen size issue with the columns. Yeah, not surprised by that yet. Haven't got to work on the columns, but it sort of works. Like it's not awful. There's some stuff here like I'd want that to be further out, I think. So there's a few little tweaks to make in there. I found the editor styling quite tricky because of the difference in the markup structure. So that has been a challenge for sure. But hopefully you can see that there's a bit of power in this, and you can like I say, you can customize your grids quite easily. This is actually the gutter down here, so I could just say maybe I want a 50 pixel gutter. Let's see what that's going to do to everything. Yeah, worked. And the max width was the same, so things didn't change, but you can see the gutter width changed there. So anyway, there you go. That's a little demo of what I've been up to. Interesting to hear people's thoughts on this. I'd love to know if everyone thinks this is a terrible idea. I'm starting to think that it might be straying too far from the way WordPress kind of wants us to do things, which might just make my life very, very difficult going forward. So we will see. But yeah, I just wanted to show you. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, just hit me up on Twitter @KeithDevon, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.